Well, welcome to this edition of the Worldview Warriors podcast. My name is Jason DeZurik. Glad you guys can tune in with me. And hello out there to everybody out there watching. Got a guest in if you can't tell, and that's my sister, Rebecca. And just really appreciate you guys listening in today. We're just going to really get focused in on what it means to follow Christ, but there's more to it than that. And again, I want to just encourage you to go to the website at worldviewwarriors.org and go check things out there. Also, don't forget that there's new blogs, there's new obviously new podcasts, but don't forget to I do a radio show every Sunday night from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock right here in this studio that you guys at least are looking at on the video. I do that here. And it's called Do Not Keep Silent, and I record that at WXML. And also, just really appreciate you guys, again, tuning in as we discuss, just what does it really look like to follow God. And we're going to talk here to Rebecca DeZurik. How you doing, Rebecca?
No, I'm doing great.
All right, great. And, what we were just talking before we got going here, what, as far as your life is an interesting life, partly because you've decided to, really get out of a job, if you will, and now you're doing a job for God. And what does that look like? What's going on with you?
Well, actually, I used to be a worship director, so that means I worked at a church. And God basically gave me a vision to go and sing and speak and basically do what I tell you to do.
Yeah.
And just basically going from a job to having nothing.
Yeah.
And so I live on basically wherever I go.
When you say a job to nothing, you mean like no real income?
No
stuff.
real income at all.
Yeah.
I basically wherever I get sent to, it's wherever the doors are open. So I do make a few phone calls every once in a while to different places like coffee shops and stuff.
Sure.
But a lot of the times people have been calling me. They've been hearing about what's going on, and they'll say, hey, we want you to come to our place. And that could be even in somebody's garage. I mean, it's all different. I've even going into some prisons and stuff. That's pretty interesting. But it's all for free will offering. And God has supplied all my needs for a year. It's been a year. I can't believe it's been a year. But so it's basically major faith living is what I call it, and extreme different than what the normal world looks at, and yeah. Especially in these times, a lot of people say, what in the world are you doing? People are looking for jobs, and you quit your job to do basically travel on the road, and
yeah.
And it's just crazy. And people think too, that going and doing what God calls you to do. This whole year, yes, I've been in different places, but there's been a few times where I felt like I was supposed to even just go to the shopping mall and walk down aisle 9. And I'm like, what in the world? So I just kind of meander and there was a divine moment in the aisle 9 of the shopping center. Somebody needed a word and you could tell. And I just basically showed up and said what I was supposed to say or, whatever, and left. I mean, I don't even really know what that was about, but I knew that type of doing what I'm doing, this type of faith living, I think those moments he uses to bless others, but he's also using it to teach me how to listen to him. And so that is what is extreme faith living is about.
Right. Well, what I find so interesting is, you, I heard you speak the other day at church, and you were, people always ask you, what are you doing? And you will always say, well, God's told me to do something. Mm-hmm. That just sounds odd. Something. Yes. But you had said you had found scriptural backing to back that up. And I found that interesting. At first I'm like, oh, come on, Beck, what are you going to be proof texting here? And you know what? I think what you had to say actually really does fit. And so if you wouldn't mind just sharing that with our listeners, I'd really appreciate that.
Yeah, through trying to walk this last year out, I was questioning, okay, God, I know I'm following you, and I know you've called me to something, and that is the words that kept going through my head, and when you walk out and do something, I see all these people, they have mission statements, and they have, their scripture verse that they're going to use and all this stuff. And it's like, I didn't have any of that. I had a vision of what God kind of gave me for the future, and it is major future, and I know that. So it's step by step. And I'm like, okay, God, in one of my quiet times, I'm like, I need some confirmation here. I don't understand why you would call me to this basically crazy living. And 1 Samuel 3, I was amazed because as I was reading it, it came alive, and there's just so much in 1 Samuel 3. But when you get down to in this verse, it's Samuel. He was ministering to the Lord before Eli, and so at this time, God was calling Samuel, and they finally figured out that the Lord was calling him, and so Eli told him, to say, "Speak, for your servant hears." So that was the first thing that stuck out to me was, okay, I'm standing here asking God to speak to me, and so you have to have a willing heart. But 1 Samuel 3, it says, 1 Samuel 3:11. And this is what just blew my mind. After Samuel answered, "Speak, for your servant hears," it says, "Then the Lord said to Samuel, Behold, I will do something in Israel, at which both ears of everyone who hears it will tingle." And I went, I will do something? The minute I read that, I couldn't believe it, because it was like, yeah, God said something. And I think in some other versions it says a thing. So it's something or a thing. Okay. And, but he didn't even say what it was. And so, in that,
really, I just want to interrupt you quick with that really, that's what God does anyway. I mean, like Noah. Did Noah know it was going to flood? He didn't know. No. He just knew he had to trust God. God basically said, build this big floating box. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was something new and radical, and there was nothing for him to base it upon. Yep. And the people walking around the city of Jericho. What's going to happen? I don't know, but I know we're supposed to walk around. And that was foolishness. Yep. It really was. Yep. Now, that brings me to another point about all this something is, we read everything in the Bible and it's there. But these people were living it, breathing it. They didn't have what we have to look back at and go, okay, what can I hold against what God has called me to do? You know what? They didn't do that. And I feel like we as Christians have been using that as a crutch to not do the something. And so therefore we just we use that as an excuse to sit on our butts because we don't have a full out plan for what we're doing. Right. And they didn't either. And so why, anyway, so that's just kind of, it was exciting for me to see that God was saying he was going to do something. And I feel like he calls a lot of us to something. And no matter what it is, it could be small, big, little. But if we don't get the huge whopping okay from in the scriptures, or if it's not some big grand plan. Yeah. Because people want to do something great. Yeah. But they're afraid, too, to go for it. Yeah. Make sense? Right. Yeah. And so, and I might be rocking the boat with some people, but, there isn't... I'm starting to believe that to be radical for Jesus, you kind of got to weigh out... First off, you got to... What exactly are you being called to do? Is it does it line up with the scriptures, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there will be a verse reference in scripture that says exactly what you need to do. Yeah. And I think that is what holds people back. Oh, I agree with you. And it's starting to get me a little frustrated, to be honest, because, people have been been talking to me and saying, I can't believe you're doing this. This is crazy and this is nuts. And yeah, it is. And, but all I can say is when you are in the hands of God and you are doing what he tells you to do, things happen. And it can be just interesting. Yeah. I mean, I get free will offerings, but people will pay for my gas, if they recognize me at the gas station or, be walking somewhere and they shake my hand and there's a gift card in their hand. I mean, God supplies needs. Those are all physical needs. But as far as the spiritual and stuff walking through this,